Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Trekyards. I, of course, am Captain Foley.
I'm Commander Cockins, and we have two guests.
I'm Dan Martin. I'm the lead writer on Star Trek Resurgence, the new interactive narrative adventure game.
My name is Andrew Grant, writer on Star Trek Resurgence.
These are some important people, Stuart. What happened? Did you just bump into them? My goodness, they beamed in.
We were lucky enough to get, the game a little bit early so we could try it out, and thankful for that, by the way. And we had some questions, because, this is kind of Trekyards' domain. We love this kind of stuff, and we were very happy to see a new Star Trek game. It's been way too long. Great era to explore. So we have questions, of course. So
great. Well, we're excited to talk about it with you because we've been following your channel, and we know that you know your stuff. So we're hoping that we have answers to those questions. I suspect you probably have your own ideas about the answers anyway. So maybe there will be some interesting discussion.
Yeah, it's kind of like what we do. We speculate. So
I mean, that first trailer was such an impressive piece of, well, damn, you're ticking all the boxes, at least potentially all the boxes, and then it comes out and it's a really fun game. I mean, it's obviously not you guys' first game, but first Star Trek game. How did you get a Star Trek game? Why Star Trek? And what have you thought the reaction's been?
Why Star Trek is, it goes back before we had the license. Andrew and I and many of the people that worked on this game, we worked together at Telltale Games prior to its bankruptcy. Making interactive narrative games, one of the big things is choice. Is what are you going to offer to the player? How do you make a balanced choice? Because that's what's different than linear storytelling. You want to tell a great story, but you want the player to have their place in it. Oftentimes we would talk about Kirk, Spock, and McCoy as this decision-making triumvirate where Kirk's in the middle and Spock's on one side, McCoy's on the other. Neither one is wrong. They're both pulling you in right, reasonable directions. Kirk has to make the decision ultimately. You, the player, have to make the decision. So, when we were making other games, we'd say, how do we balance this like Kirk, Spock, and McCoy? So it felt like a natural fit in a lot of ways.
The ultimate franchise for that format of like player-driven narrative, and you're making choices that will shape your experience, and that triad is just so compelling.
And some of the best stuff in Star Trek is discussion. It's not about the explosions. It's about sitting around a table and saying, how are we going to solve this problem, or what is the right way to solve this problem? And so that's something that, historically we've done well is writing these conversations that you get to navigate. It's all about the ethical and moral dilemmas. That's what Star Trek comes down to so often, and that's just really meaty stuff for a player to have to contend with and wrestle with.
Tell us about the beginning of the process. Like, whose idea was this? How was it pitched?
What was day one?
Day one is, all right, we got the license. How are we going to live up to it? I think it was the history of collectively what we had done at Telltale Games and the storytelling that we'd done there gave Paramount, which was CBS at the time, but now they've come back together like a happy family. They were, that could give them the confidence that we would handle their franchise with care, because, not only had we told great stories in other licensed media, but, we respect the license. We want to make a great, Game of Thrones game, which Andrew and I worked on together, or Walking Dead, or if it's, something smaller like The Wolf Among Us.
The daunting part of this is that we were literally looking at a blank page where everything was on the table. Like, what era are we going to set this in? What are our reference points? And for the creative team, all huge fans, the common touch point was the next generation. Like, that's where we zeroed in. It's like, that's what, we love. And that felt like the right fit for us.
And we were responsible.
Came up with the timeline.
Yeah, well, we were responsible too. We did some market research and found out that there was an appetite for this, which I think, Picard season 3 has really validated that people just love this era. They love that crew. They love the feeling of those adventures. And that's what we wanted to bring to life and put the player into. When I saw the second to last and the last episode of Picard season 3, I had this feeling of coming home to the Enterprise D. It's a real place in my mind. I can close my eyes and walk the corridors. And we wanted to make a game where on our ship, players will feel like that's a real place. They can walk the corridors. They have a sense that, they know what their quarters would look like, even though we don't show it in the game. That was part of it. And then we had to figure out, how are we actually going to do it? Where are we going to tell this story? And it came down to 2380 was a great place to set it, because it's after all of Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and the movies of the Next Generation. But it's still 5 to 7 years, so you probably know, before the supernova, the Hobus supernova event. When we started this, we didn't know what Picard was going to be. We just knew that it involved, the fallout of the Romulan supernova, and so we knew we wanted to stay away from that and give it some room. And so it just made sense, just give ourselves as much lead time as we can. Set it in 2380, set it on a different ship, set it at the edge of the galaxy, and give ourselves the room to tell our own story. But more importantly, give the players room to decide for themselves what's going to happen without feeling like they had to stick the landing on, well, I know that, Spock has to go back in time at the end of this game, so I have to get him to the jellyfish. It's like, no, and we do have Spock in this, but he's years away from all of that. So that was kind of our one of the deciding factors of where to set it.
Often these things are a developer might be approached by a studio because they want to do something. Sounds like you literally just said, hey, we want to do blank slate. I mean, that literally had no pre-ideas to pitch CBS. It was absolutely a reputation, can we give a go? Or was there anything pre?
I think it was the perfect marriage of the format of the game and the license. Because you imagine, somebody comes in and says, I want to make a shooter game. They might not know when they're going to set the shooter. They might not know, who the characters in the shooter game are going to be, but they know that that's the gameplay of it, right? And that's probably a big part in saying, hey, we know how to make shooter games. This is perfect for this other license. And you say, yeah, you guys, let's get together and do that. I think it's that's where it was, just such a great fit for Star Trek.
The natural fit was the idea that when you're making choices in this game, there are no wrong choices. Like, you can choose to defy orders at every turn, and the game will honor that. It may not like the other NPCs may not like that. They may not respect it, but if that's your playthrough, then so be it. And that's what sort of shapes and defines your experience through the game, which may be totally different than someone else's.
That's the one thing I like about it, is the replayability. How long did it take, though, to get everything written and to get progression on the computer or the game aspect of it?
Started in earnest in the very beginning of 2020. So we had a big meeting with people from CBS Paramount where we pitched the idea. And it was a creative conference. We pitched the idea. We went in knowing we wanted to do, spoiler alert, it's in the trailer, involve the Takan Empire. Okay. CBS/Paramount were a great partner because they said to us, we want to help you make the game you want to make. I think it helped that we came in really wanting to make an authentic love letter to Star Trek that respected the franchise. We weren't trying to, make it something it's not. We really wanted to honor it.
You didn't even make it a shooter, really. There's some, but...
Well, the way we looked at it sort of structurally from that standpoint is we wanted it to be like Picard Season 3 is weirdly a great touchstone for it, because it's very much what we were talking about. A bingeable season of Star Trek, serialized Star Trek that still had the feel of, you've got moments where you're doing an away mission. The moments of tricordering or shuttle flying or shooting or engineering, all those things, they're not supposed to be the game. It's supposed to be like, where would you have an action sequence, or where would you have this moment of mystery and exploration in the show? And putting the player in control of that just felt natural and gave it the ebb and flow of the, real Star Trek.
Well, then, compared to all the other franchises you've worked with, is it one more organic gameplay to story constructions you've had versus a Game of Thrones, where you obviously don't have that many toolbox items, whereas this, you can throw in a shuttle, throw in a phaser fight? Was this just easier in a sense?
I think it's harder because there are people like you and people like me that say, well, how does this work? And have seen it on screen where you can kind of fudge it, and you can see somebody like say, oh, this tricorder thing, this is what it tells me. But how do you put it in somebody's hand and make it feel like they're actually starting to uncover the pieces? It all comes down to wanting to get it right across every piece of it. And so there's this, the responsibility you feel
But there was an organic fit in the sense that we chose to have 2 points of view. Because right from the beginning, we knew we wanted to have a lower decks character to show maybe the choices that are made on the bridge and then how that ripples through and affects your other POV. And you have to live with the choices that you made, And so it also created sort of an organic fit in terms of like an A storyline and a B storyline, so that we could end one character's chapter on a cliffhanger, segue to the other, and then hopefully seamlessly dovetail back to the original playable character and have it feel like, okay, there's a nice pacing to this and ebb and flow, much like the shows.
Yeah, our goal was always to have you get to the end of a chapter with some sort of feeling of I know something big or something bad is about to happen. I want to keep playing this chapter, but by the time you get to the end of the next chapter, that you have that same feeling, and you're like, oh, but I want to keep playing this point of view.
I did that.
Don't send me back to that
times,
one. But then when you get there, it's that's kind of the best version of it that we can hope for.
And worth noting as well, because Dan mentioned Picard season 3, the large part or the majority of our story was written before Picard season 1 had even come out, or was coming out as we were writing our story.
Well, for me personally, I gotta say I really appreciate the fact that you did do that split storyline, because I do like the lower decks aspect of it. We are techie guys here. We love the tech and the ships and stuff, and to be able to like pry off the nacella cover and see the warp coils and actually work the Elicars and work the controls and do tractor beaming and transporter stuff was really fun. That's something that I think a lot of games are missing. The tricorder stuff I can see in a lot of games, but I really like the way you incorporated all that kind of techie stuff in there.
It's shocking how good mundane things in the Trek universe can be fun.
Yeah.
What a trick.
Especially for guys like us.
It was very much intentional. Like from the beginning, we thought, how can we create the most immersive Star Trek experience possible? And it's more than just, the diplomacy on the bridge and the things that happen at a higher level, but like you said, the mundane stuff, like that tactile feeling of like prying something open. It's just kind of cool if you are familiar with the franchise, and it's like, okay, I'm in this world now, making these choices.
Was there a choice made to make it non-serialized, a la the old Telltale games, releasing several smaller chunks versus then the big chunk? Was there ever possibly doing, season 1, 10 episodes, etc.?
From the beginning, we knew we wanted to tell a single large kind of epic story, because, when you release the first episode and then over the next 6, 7, 8 months, release the next 4, you learn things about the game that you didn't know when you released the first one, and you make story connections that you can't go back and make fit into the first episode. Whereas there are definitely things that we've changed across the board as we wrote the entire script. You're able to look at it from start to finish. You start to build it. You still have pickups. You can write new lines. You can you can say, oh, we need this element here, let's put it there first, because now we can see it all at once. So there's a quality difference to it. And then also part of it was the way that we structured it with the 2 characters going back and forth for chapters. We felt like from a player perspective, you can sit down and you can play for 10 minutes, you can play for 20 minutes, you can play for the 2 hours if you want to. I've seen people say that they sat down and they played it for 9 hours straight and played the whole thing in one go, which is, awesome. I saw a tweet that said, I stayed up until 8 a.m. to play this and finish it. I couldn't stop. And I said,
people are on their like 3rd or 4th playthrough, but intentionally we wanted to create basically a full season of narrative content, or, sort of a standalone playable movie, if you will. And that was, our goal from the beginning.
Now, as far as the structure of it, I mean, I've always been fascinated by choose your own adventure books, even when I was a kid. How is that a difficult process, writing that, because you have to choose different scenes, different things, and how much does it actually affect the gameplay? Is it harder to write one of these than just a standard story? And that being said, is there a definitive canon version of this actual story that you guys think is the way it actually should be?
Well, I'll take the second question first. The canon version is your version. Whatever the version is that you played, that's the version that we say is canon, and that makes it difficult first if you're
making 20 or 30 sequels, then, is what I'm hearing.
Well, to make sequels, you need to start figuring out how do we, carry these various
It's the
threads
Mass
forward.
Effect version, but it's like 19 different
Yeah.
choices and everything. Yeah, right.
And at the end of this game, there are a lot of different potential states, and
Yeah.
people ask, how much does it branch? How many different endings are there? You're going to go through roughly the same arc as everybody. We have to build, digital sets and, record dialogue and build ship assets. Different state of some really big changes are possible at the end. Captain, you know what I'm talking about. And then also for characters, how they feel about you can be very different. Characters will be alive or dead based on the choices you've made. So kind of in combination, how many different endings that I haven't done the math on it, but it starts to get exponential in terms of what can possibly be the configuration towards the end of it. They say that third act problems are first act problems. So, the stuff we set up in the first act has to go somewhere, and there's a logical conclusion, even though we offer you these different ways to interact with that story. And there are some, big differences potentially for the end. So
Actually,
on top of which, there are no wrong choices. So each choice has to be balanced, like equally valid. Right. And so to answer your question, is it difficult to write? Yes, it is difficult to write.
So it's like a lot longer than just a regular story, because you have to write all the side stuff and all the alternate scenes, and it just seems like a headache.
And hopefully it pays off, because again, it's crafted to the way that you want to play it. Like some people have said, like, I'm going to emulate Trekyards in all of my choices here, right? As for one playthrough, and we try and tailor the story to those choices that you.
I was going to say every choice gets this laser focus on, particularly the ones that are larger branches. The question is, is it a good choice to make in the moment? Is it interesting in the moment? And then, does it have downstream effects that are interesting and worth building as separate storylines that you have to carry forward? And, if it doesn't meet both of those standards, it's probably not worth doing, because these, outside of the writing, which, Andrew and I, that's what we do. We think it's pretty hard. It's also pretty hard to build all of the content as well. So it has to be worth it. It has to be something that the player is going to feel something different and get something different out of it by making that choice. It's it kind of liken it to if you watch an execution, it's pretty bad. If you have to be the person that presses the button on the electric chair, it's a totally different experience. And so we think it's a great story, but we think it's a completely different experience when you play it.
Yeah, for sure. With the controller in your hand, and also just to add additional level of complexity to those choices, is it true to the ethos of Starfleet, right? Like, it's not like we're offering choices where anything is possible. And is it true to the character that you're playing, right? Like, so Jara coming in as the XO on a ship, trying to navigate the relationships while people are, she's got to earn their trust. People are not quite sure who she is. Captain Solano didn't choose to promote from within. Like, these are all dynamics that you have to navigate as the player with the controller in your hand, and choices that you make may win some people over and simultaneously piss off other people.
But let's talk about the numbers, because I know that, a lot of us are tech oriented.
Let's get under the hood.
The game plays for roughly 10 hours. Some people can play a little faster. Some people take longer. I've seen people say it took 15 hours because they explored things. Probably there are people who played 15 hours because they had some trouble. 10 hours is kind of the general, like, if you were to say, let's just put up the average gameplay. But the script itself is more like it's 1,400 screenplay pages about, if you put it all end to end, which is more than the number of screenplay pages that would have been in a season of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So, the 22 episodes at 44 pages an episode. So it's a lot of writing. There's a lot of story. There's a lot of things to uncover. We think that it does bear replay, not just for the different storylines, but for me, sometimes you're like, what is the next thing I can have this character say? And you tear your hair out. But then sometimes you're like, oh, there are 3 great lines here. Which one am I going to choose? When you do this, you can just put all 3, which is sometimes that's fun.
Well, as you were talking there, your answer kind of had a revelation. It's going to be hard for you guys to do a sequel, because everybody chose different things for each character. So you kind of need to have a canon version if you're going to do a sequel, because maybe the one lady doesn't have a visor. you know.
Well, it depends on the media, because Andrew and I have both been involved in sequels of these types of games, and sometimes you just have to carry it forward and figure out ways to make it work. So, but the important thing is choice is the heart of the experience. So we'd never want to undermine the choice, and to say that there's this one version, we think does a disservice to the players and to the game itself.
And not to inflate anyone's egos, but be prepared for ego inflation. Having played many a game in many a choice system, I was it's definitely a game that evolves anyway as you get more accustomed to the people and the situation. But I was kind of shocked how real the choices felt, in that both, for the most part, there was always a sense of, this is a thing I might say, this is a thing I would probably not say, this is a thing, okay. But there was never really a good, bad medium. And that was interesting by itself, because I was taking my gut reaction approach in most situations, and that right or wrong doesn't matter. I was just sort of reacting as I was feeling the character. And I was almost always felt rewarded by just doing my job as Starfleet and not feeling, well, that was a right or wrong. And there's a few genuinely hard-hitting things that I'm like, that was a bad choice, but I had to make it because I was not going to do the other thing. But not because it's a bad choice, because I don't want to make it to do that thing for that person. And many times it was incredibly effective and made me feel quite uncomfortable and well written and really good. Possibly one of the best I've seen of this sort, where it's clever, and that's the writing. So really good job, guys.
Well, we really appreciate that. Part of it is figuring out how do you make, in our case, 3 dialogue choices that don't feel like a flavor of yes, no, and maybe. One of the things that makes that easier is, when you have a fleshed out character that that has personality that you can imbue every response with. And also just saying, we're not going to do, a good and bad version. We're not doing, to take from another Star franchise, light side and dark side. We want something that's more complex. And Andrew spearheaded the nuance, and Andrew spearheaded the feedback for characters, where you can hit the pause screen and you can see what they're thinking about you based on your last interaction. And it's not like up or down. It's character.
We've also got whereby, especially as the second in command, everyone sort of already respects them because they've gained the rank of commander and XO. So no one's going to be like, damn, I'm going to beat this person up off shift. So it's more about the iteration of, well, I don't agree with it, but I get why they did it, versus I hate them. So you kind of have that nice formality, which you wouldn't have in other shows, or Game of Thrones and Walking Dead. You killed the zombie, you didn't kill the zombie. Yeah? But this, do you betray orders? Do you do it? But everyone's sort of right in their own way. It's really fascinating.
I mean, that we wanted to engage in the fantasy of just pure professionalism of Starfleet, and our characters do take some wider swings, I think, than you'd normally see on the Next Generation show. I think we have a flawed captain. I don't think that's any secret. At the same time, one of the things that we were really happy about being able to do with the prequel comic book was flesh out what happened and say, why a certain character doesn't like Jara when she comes on the ship, because there's a history there that, we had talked about when we were writing the game. And then, we had, as Picard says in season 1 of the Picard show, I don't want the game to end. We didn't want to leave the Resolute. So we're like, we've got more stories to tell. Yeah. It is not required for playing the game. And frankly, it's not required to play the game to get anything out of the comic book, because it's its own self-contained story. We feel like it's additive. And the other thing is, like, Star Trek has a very specific tone, particularly the Star Trek of that era. I think it was Rick Berman who said something to the effect of, you're writing a period piece that just happens to be in the future. Particularly with the officers, we wanted to be true to that. We wanted it to feel, it's a little bit formal, and it's a little articulate. We wanted to capture that. And then that was one of the fun things about having our Lower Decks character, our enlisted character. So not even an ensign. They talk about the Lower Decks, both the TV show and the Next Generation episode, which was absolutely an inspiration for this, dichotomy. Those are still Academy graduates. They're ensigns. For me, I love Miles O'Brien, the hardest working man in Starfleet. He's the only enlisted officer, the only NCO. Obviously they exist. So we wanted to see it. I was always like, who's the guy that drives the forklift on the Enterprise? It's kind of like the power loader in Alien. I was like, what's the Star Trek version of it, and who drives it? And as it turns out, I think that they have interesting stories as well.
And by the same token, sometimes it's just cool to make a good impression on Ambassador Spock and get his approval.
So thank you, both Dan and Andrew, for joining us. We really appreciate it, and it was nice hearing all this behind-the-scenes input. We really appreciate that. So.
And if you'd like to come back once I've fully finished the game and also more time has passed, we can talk full spoilers because not everyone's played the game. We want to give them time to breathe, etc. Or to come back.
Story elements would be great.
To full
Absolutely, spoilers. Book it. We'll come back.
Thank you guys so much.
All right. So until next time, I am Captain Foley.
I'm Connell Cookings.
I'm Dan Martin.
Perfect. I'm Andrew Grant.
Yes, you are.
Thank you, everybody, for watching, and see you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.